Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I call this special meeting of council to order for Monday, March 15th at 7 o'clock. First council, we need a resolution to hold the public meeting without the public in attendance. That motion is circulated in your agenda. Will someone move that motion?
Moved.
Moved by Councillor Bond, second by Councillor Back. Any other discussion? I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you. And yeah, just before we get going, did want to mention that this is a special meeting of council, and what makes it special is just that it wasn't in our original calendar when we, at the beginning of every year, we set up when we expect to have meetings. And this one, because it's during spring break, wasn't originally anticipated. But in our last regular meeting of council, unfortunately, our streaming was interrupted. We weren't able to hold the meeting because we couldn't actually broadcast live to the community. So we made the decision at that time not to convene that meeting and to reschedule it for tonight. And so that's why it says special in the agenda, but I'm inclined to treat it like a regular meeting with council because that's what it's here to replace. Yes, councillors were not originally anticipating this additional meeting in their schedule. I'm so appreciative that everybody has been able to make the time, and I see Councillor Forbes popped up there as well. Welcome, Councillor Forbes. And so at this time we have adoption of the agenda. I have one recommendation, which is that we withdraw the Lynn Canyon Pay Parking Pilot bylaw amendments. It was a request from staff that we withdraw it. It's up for adoption, so there wouldn't be a matter of debate. So would somebody be willing to move the agenda as amended without 8.2? Okay, moved by Councillor Hanson. Is there a seconder for that? I'll second. Okay, and call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you. So that's with 8.2 withdrawn, but everything else approved. Council, we do have a set of minutes that's been circulated. This is for the February 22nd regular meeting of council. Will someone move the adoption of, are there any errors or omissions from those meeting minutes? Hearing none, will someone move adoption of the February 22nd regular meeting minutes?
Moved.
Moved by Councillor Back. Is there a seconder on the motion? Seconded by Councillor Bond. Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries, and the minutes are now adopted. Moving on to reports from council or staff. Bylaw 8.1, this is the update to public notification and signage requirements. This is up for adoption. And so will someone move adoption? Moved by Councillor Hanson, second by Councillor Back. Call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. And that is for adoption for 8.1. Okay, on to item 8.3, because 8.2 was withdrawn. 8.3, this is the 2021 Fire Smart Economic Recovery Grant. This is a grant application. We do have the fire chief here if there are any questions. Sorry, Chief, you and I didn't check in ahead of time. Did you have some comments before council considers the matter?
Your Worship, Mayor Little, there were no additional comments. We did provide a report to council in advance, but I'm more than happy to take any questions that may have arisen.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief. Someone be moving a recommendation? This is just for a grant application.
I'll move it.
Seconded by Councillor Hanson. Any other discussion on the motion? Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next, we have item 8.4. This is the UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, Flood Risk Assessment, Flood Mapping, Flood Mitigation Planning, Application for Coastal Wastewater Infrastructure Flood Mitigation, Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan. Okay.
I'll move the recommendation.
Recommendation's been moved by Councillor Bond and seconded by Councillor Hanson. Again, this is a grant application, so we generally are supportive of these, but I see no further discussion from council, so I'm going to call a question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And now we're moving on to the UBCM resolutions. Councillor Curran has put forward a series of reports here, and Councillor, I have speakers to 8.6 and 8.7, and yeah, 8.6 and 8.7. So we're skipping along real quickly through the agenda here, but what I'm inclined to do is let you introduce them, and then we'll get a seconder for them, and then we'll have any discussion and move along. But 8.6 and 8.7 will have speakers to them. But Councillor Curran, your reports, the floor is yours for 8.5.
Thank you. Yeah, so 8.5 is just trying to get to it on my iPad stopped working, so apologies, just 1 second. Can someone shout a page number at me?
Provincial Circular Economy Strategy, and 8.5 is.
Oh no, I found it. So just to clarify, we're just on 8.5, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so this resolution is put forward. The Provincial Circular Economy Strategy is something that we are, the request is to lobby the provincial government to adopt a provincial circular economy strategy. But I also wanted to contextualize it and localize it for how that would benefit us as a municipality. If people are familiar with C40 cities, they actually have a 70-page report that I read that's called Municipality-Led Circular Economy Case Studies, and it lists case studies that have happened, circular economy examples that have happened worldwide. Canada's far behind on what's happening in other places of the world. And as a wealthy country that produces incredibly obscene, in my opinion, volumes of waste, I think we have a responsibility to transform our systems. There's also an organization called Circular Cities and Regions Initiative. And I just wanted to read a quote from them because I think it's helpful to contextualize it again. Local governments are well positioned to be key enablers of the circular economy transition. They're committed to creating thriving, resilient, and livable communities by delivering on a range of societal, economic, and environmental objectives while taking bold action on climate change. Most resources are consumed and waste is generated at the local level, so we're in a good position to take action. So I am looking for council support to move this forward to the UBCM. Happily, we did have some success last year with the resolutions being advanced either by the executive or by the body. It was a bit weird because it was virtual, but this is one way to advance this, and I'd also like to see us take action at the local level. But for this, that's what I'm looking for, support for this resolution.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curran. Is there a seconder for the motion? Second by Councillor Back. And apparently I had the list a little bit disorganized here. I've got Hazen Colbert had wanted to sign up and to speak to 8.5, not 8.6. So just checking with the clerk. Yes, I see Hazen has been moved to panelist. Mr. Colbert, can you hear me?
Mr. Little, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. First of all, I want to say that first I want to make it clear that I have to remove a certain set of headphones and then keep talking.
Okay.
So I think that Councillor Curran's motion has great value, and you have all received my email on the subject. And I do support Councillor Curran's motion, but in a slightly different way. Councillor Curran has suggested that it's the manufacturers and producers that are creating items that are throwaway. And actually, she's right. And the reason they're creating those throwaway items is because that's what our consumers are demanding. So I would like to mention, I was a kid. I was about 8 or 10 years old. And my brother and I used to go out and we used to find bottles and cans, and we would take them in for recycling. I'm 59 years old. This occurred 50 years ago. 50 years ago, we used to get 10 cents for a bottle and 10 cents for a can. Guess what? It's the same amount today. So if we want to promote a circular economy, and I support the circular economy, Councillor Curran, I support it. You know what I would suggest that we ask the provincial government to do? Increase the bottle deposits to 50 cents. 50 cents, that's half a dollar, 50 cents a can and 50 cents a bottle. In addition, let's increase the deposit for water bottles less than 1.5 liters to $1. I assure you, if we do that, there will be a tremendous change in the way in which people deal with those particular items. I say this as a person that when I was a kid, I knew the value of collecting those cans and bottles. So if we can somehow do that, Councillor Curran, I am fully supportive of what you're suggesting. We have to change consumer behavior. And I'm also going to say another way we change consumer behavior is that when we have consumers who buy luxury items, I have visited Singapore. People that buy luxury items there, do you know what the tax rate is? 100%. It has a remarkable income on creating a circular economy. These are the types of things we have to do. And I call these things the big idea. So Councillor Curran, I am going to be right behind you when you ask for the circular economy and you promote the big idea. And I'm now going to defer any time I have to anyone else that wants to talk on this subject. And Mayor Fiddle, thank you for your help tonight.
No trouble. Thank you, Mr. Fulbert. And
yep.
Thank you. You raise a good point. I mean, obviously, those kinds of incentive pieces need to be considered in these matters. I mean, I know a kiddo, it's a tragic story. He had saved up cans and bottles for months and months and months in order to be able to afford a trip abroad. He went all over the community for it, and then COVID struck and canceled the trip. And so, unfortunately, he did not get to go to, I think it was Dominican Republic for a music thing. But yeah, interesting. Yeah, so thank you very much, Mr. Fulbert. Councillor Curran, thank you for your introductory comments. I believe our seconder on the matter, was that Councillor Back?
Yes, Your Worship.
Any comments, Councillor Back?
I don't have any comments, no.
Okay. I guess my own additional comments on it. You know, I think that this is important. We have, you know, limited amount of space and a limited amount of processing capacity for waste. We have to be smarter about how we reduce waste coming into our system. I sit on the Zero Waste Committee for Metro Vancouver, and the biggest single source that we really need to address is deconstruction waste from home construction, which is, you know, again, we've had lots of, that's 8.6. But again, if you were actually planning on the reuse of materials from the time of construction, then you'd be able to significantly limit that. So I see these two as being very connected. Councillor Forbes.
Can I make an amendment?
Why don't you speak first, and then we'll see. Amending another councillor's report could be challenging. What did you have in mind, Councillor Forbes?
Well, I'd like to see all these UBCM resolutions taken off the agenda for tonight, and I do have some comments as to why I think that way.
That wouldn't be an amendment.
Okay, then I'll just read my points.
There you go.
Even though there are some good ideas and very good ideas and thoughts in these resolutions, and I really do feel that, I am opposed to this council proceeding on any of the UBCM resolutions at this time. The environmental motions that have appeared on our agenda in the last year are very complicated issues, and they have many ramifications on our way of life going forward. One of our jobs as a council is to communicate, explain, and try to inform our citizens to the best of our ability. on new issues and directions that may come before this council for action. Another one is to listen to the community. I asked a year ago that we have some public information meetings and involve the community and educate our community before we started down this path. Nothing has happened. I don't feel that we have given our community the information they need to express their views. We've heard from one group of people who have a particular agenda, and that's fine. I have nothing against that. And they have been very present and very vocal with their wishes, but we haven't heard from the majority of our community. The DNV has a population of approximately 88,000 people, and the average person is trying to survive COVID, has been concerned with having a job, paying the bills, having a home, or keeping their business alive in the last year. They may not have been fully aware of all the new environmental issues that are being discussed. We have not reached out to our total community to find out how they feel or to discuss the possible pros and cons for any of the 6 UBCM resolutions on our agenda tonight. Does the average citizen know what all the acronyms stand for? Do they know the step code, SEEP, GHG, CCME, FII, PACE, embodied carbon, circular economy, zero carbon, possible changes to the building codes and Consumer Protection Acts, adding new land uses like urban interface areas, let alone what the climate targets are? Does the average person know who and what the role of UBCM and LGLMA are? Have we explained what submitting resolutions to these bodies means? No. The answer is no, and we cannot put these resolutions forward until we talk to all of our citizenry and hear their concerns and their opinions. We need to listen. We also have had no staff reports on these 6 motions, and I want to hear from our very talented staff on how these particular subjects would apply or affect our municipality, not Delta or Surrey or Burnaby or Pitt Meadows, our municipality. There has also not been any costs associated with these initiatives should they be adopted, and how these costs would affect our budget and the taxpayers. We have recently heard that the community has already felt they are paying enough in taxes. There is a reason that council must pass a resolution to send a matter to UBCM or LMLGA, and that an individual councillor cannot do that on their own. This is for checks and balances, so good policy is brought forward for consideration rather than from all the municipalities, 1,000 different unvetted pet projects. And I'm not referring to the environment issue as a pet project, just saying you could have 1,000 different motions or resolutions coming from all the municipalities. Staff reports, public information nights, and council consensus are checks, and hopefully they will produce an informed decision that is best for our municipality. I am not prepared to rubber stamp such things and send them forward with our district, our councils, and my name on them without those steps having taken place. I've been asking since last year that when this council is considering environmental motions, that the citizens of the DNV deserve to be well informed and have a say as to what they want their council to do for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. And there's a lot in that statement. I'm going to pick just a small part to respond to. And I think it's fair to point out that probably the general public doesn't know what the UBCM is necessarily, or what the LMLGA is or does. And so the UBCM is the Union of BC Municipalities, and the LMLGA is the Lower Mainland Local Government Association. I've served on the executive for the LMLGA. And what those two bodies do is each municipality in the province of BC contributes a little bit of money to the UBCM. Each sub-area, so the LMLGA is a sub-area of UBCM. It includes basically 3 regional districts, which is Metro Vancouver, the SQ Squamish Lillooet Regional District, and the Lower Fraser Canyon, Fraser Valley Regional District, are all in the LMLGA. And what this is actually a sort of a professional association for elected representatives. It's an opportunity for you to meet with your colleagues and hear their concerns and find out what's going on in their communities. And how it's different from a normal resolution to council is that in a normal resolution to council, you're asking the municipality to take action on a particular item. You're setting policy, you're setting a motion, you're setting a bylaw, something to govern the District of North Vancouver's actions. And resolutions to the Union of BC Municipality and the LMLGA are more or less asking the province of BC or the LMLGA to look at a potential policy matter and have a discussion at the floor of their conference or convention. And so in these particular issues, it's referring these items to the LMLGA for discussion. And then at that point, if you have once you've had the discussion, if the executive group and the members there endorse the matter, then it goes on to the UBCM with an endorsement stamp from the LMLGA. But even when it goes to the Union of BC Municipalities, it's of no material force and effect unless the province takes it on and makes something out of it. These are more or less the professional associations for our elected representatives from a given area, telling what's a priority to them, what's a concern for them. And then sort of my personal remarks on that is, I support every single member of council wanting to bring their issues to their area association or to their union. You want to be able to talk about a matter, you want to be able to meet with colleagues, find people of similar priorities and interests, then I think you should have an opportunity to do that. And so, you know, I'm generally supportive of councillors bringing matters to their area association or union for further discussion on it. And but I definitely hear your concern, Councillor Forbes, about how jargony some things get and how it's difficult to determine where the community is at on some of these items specifically, because we obviously don't do community engagement on these kinds of individual issues. But that's okay, because the LMLGA doesn't ask for that and the UBCM doesn't ask for that. They're just simply asking for their members to share issues of concern that they think that the area should have a discussion on. And that's what it's the purpose that it plays.
With all due respect, Mayor, and thank you for explaining to 10 more citizenry.
Your Worship, I haven't spoken the first time.
Let's
I'm
just
finishing.
clarify this first, and then I'll get to Councillor Hanson. Yes, Councillor Forbes?
With all due respect, as I was saying, thank you for explaining to about 10 more citizenry who may be watching. This is not a criticism of these resolutions. It's more criticism of the process that I don't like. And it's not just that they move it on. When it actually gets to UBCM, as in this motion, it says, UBCM requests that the province of BC develop a provincial circular economy strategy. So once it's passed through the local body, then passed through the local association, and then passed to UBCM, it's considered a mandate for UBCM to lobby the provincial government for these things.
Correct.
And should the provincial government decide okay on these things, then that will affect our community. And so that's why I feel that the decision on moving, we haven't explained these things. They're very technical. I have to constantly look up abbreviations and acronyms. They're very, very technical, and some people might not have been paying attention in the last year as to what these things are. I think we owe it to our community to have public information nights, to explain it to them before we move these things to the point where they will be lobbying the provincial government and affecting our everyday lives.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm happy to support the motion for calling on the provincial government to develop a circular economy. I can say that I view the motion and the contents of the motion as aspirational. They're a statement of goals and principles. Many details of the proposed circular economy are indeed left unstated, and I wouldn't take my support for the motion calling for the provincial government to develop a circular economy to mean that I necessarily support any individual planks or wings of that strategy that are not stated but may come forward in the future. a comment has been made about the view of the community, and I think we do know that the community is united in seeking environmental well-being, in seeking strategies that minimize waste and create sustainability of our economy and our environment. As goals, those are widely accepted, and our community is united in supporting those goals. And to the extent that this motion is aspirational and calls on the provincial government to find policies that lead us in the direction of these goals, I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. See no further speakers from council at this time. All right, I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion passes with Councillor Forbes opposed. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 8.6. Councillor Curran, again, this is your report, and so you're welcome to make some opening comments.
Thank you. This resolution was actually inspired by a resident in our community who had reached out about a demolition that was imminent on Kings Road of an old heritage-ish, I don't want to say it had heritage distinction, but an older home. And she had connected with Adam Corneal, who's also a resident of the District of North Vancouver, and has started a company called Unbuilders, which got all the dragons to turn and is really making waves. And he will actually be presenting as a delegation to our community later this month, which is really exciting. And so he has actually been doing a lot of work in this space in terms of provincial and federal lobbying. So I think it's really exciting. And this is, I think there is a great deal of support in our community to reduce waste and to reduce our overall footprint and to achieve our climate targets. The demolition, there's lots of information in the report about the data, but I did want to share some of the work that's happening with this wood that's coming out of the houses is being used to build other homes. So I can't imagine anyone in our community that would not want to see wood reused to build Habitat for Humanity, as is one of the examples that's happening. So the system, this is about system change again, as a lot of these are broadly under the umbrella of system change. There's millions of metric tons of materials that are created each year from demolition, and 75% of landfilled materials could have been salvaged, resold, or recycled. And Metro Vancouver, it's a third of our waste. And I did speak with staff about this. They agree, like we're not doing enough. So I think that this is something that's really important and can make a big impact. So that is why I'm bringing it forward, and I hope council will support that.
Thank you, Councillor Curran. Is there a seconder for the motion?
I'm happy to
Councillor
second.
Bond. Councillor Bond, do you have any comments?
Yes, I do. Sorry, I had my taskbar was covering my mute button, but yeah, just similar to the previous motion, and as stated in Councillor Curran's report, deconstruction and construction and changing those systems and how we build and rebuild homes in our community are part of a circular economy strategy. And I think one of the saddest sights to see is an old home with first growth timber or other kind of very high quality materials that are almost not in existence anymore, being torn down by an excavator and tossed in a bin and then going straight to the landfill. So I'm very supportive of this motion, and just want to commend Councillor Curran on how well researched and referenced this is. This is the type of report that if we ask staff for a report, I would expect something like this back. So I think all of the data and the background information and the science and scientific journal entries are all in there. And so I think this is a very well researched and well put together report and a resolution for discussion at UBCM.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bond. Councillor Forbes.
Again, I'd just like to reiterate, I'm not criticizing the resolutions, I'm criticizing the process. And I don't see why the community shouldn't be informed. I think that's one of our jobs. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, I'm happy to support as an aspirational statement of principle. The resolution calls for the provincial government to, quote, develop a plan to, quote, significantly reduce construction waste. And I do believe that that is a goal widely supported by our community, and I'm happy, therefore, to support the resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Mr. Stewart, did you have a comment?
Just, Your Worship, this is simply a letter to the UBCM. With all courtesy, 90% of the resolutions that the UBCM passes don't result in action by the provincial government. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't do this. And I will say that it would be inappropriate to spend thousands of dollars on community consultation on a letter that we're not sure as to whether the province was going to actually entertain any action. If in fact the province supported this for some reason, we would have ample opportunity for public consultation.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Councillor Beck.
Thank you very much. And just to say that I'm very supportive of this motion. In fact, all the motions, I think they do represent some really big ideas and what would be some very interesting discussions. So hopefully they all do go to UBCM, because I would look forward to those conversations. This whole idea of deconstruction and the unbuilders, which I'm familiar with, is one that I'm really interested in. And I've actually talked to some developers of single family homes who are already doing some work in this space, but want to have more options in the framework to do more of it. So I think this is a really good thing. Again, there's lots of details. This is very, very high level, but at this level, I certainly support it.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. And just my own comments on this. I worked in the lumber industry for 19 years, and I can tell you is that when you put new lumber into a house, only a very small percentage of it is inspected and graded at that high level. I mean, when you're back at the mill, you know, they all get some perusal, but largely they get their grading in class based on a big lot of them together. So 294 pieces of 2x4 all in one block. A handful of them get actually moisture tested, graded, and then that sets the grade for the entire bundle. And so at that early stage, before we build a house, it's a spot check and sort of a ballpark as to whether or not that lumber meets that grade. But when lumber comes out of a house in deconstruction, there's no similar type of grading process. The wood is considered to be damaged and destroyed and not reusable for any kinds of what they call an MSR, which is machine stress rating. So you can't use it as load bearing in any way, shape, or form for a building. And in order to be able to use it as a load bearing of any kind, each individual piece has to go through its own inspection process, which makes it extremely difficult to reuse certain lumber in certain roles within houses. And I think that if the provincial government was able to look at that, I mean, if a piece of fir, 4x4 beam of fir has been inside the walls of a house for 100 years, and you know, you shouldn't have to go through a full process to determine that it's still useful in construction. It's still it's been protected from the elements for 100 years. Therefore, it's, you know, probably quite useful in reconstruction. And we just don't have that ability. We have a much higher standard for new product going in, a much higher standard for reused product than we have for new product going in. And so I think it's, again, one of those barriers or impediments to deconstruction and making sure that very usable product is put not to waste, but instead reused in some fashion. During the Christmas break, they had those extra free channels on TV, and one of them was this DIY one, and it had these guys that basically go around to these 100-year-old farm homes and take everything that they can get out of it, and they reuse it for cabinets, for flooring, for paneling, for any use you can imagine. They're reusing the wood in it because they don't want to use it. I think as Councillor Bond put it, you know, this very, very valuable wood that you just can't replace through natural sources anymore. And so, you know, it's critically important that we remove this waste from our normal waste stream. I don't want to be quoted on the spot, but I think it's about 40% of our waste stream is deconstruction waste. And it's becoming a higher percentage of our waste because we're able to lower the other things that come through. We're using recycling services and other kinds of diversion tactics to be able to get it out of our waste stream, but we haven't been able to tackle this construction waste piece. So yes, it does call for system change, and I do think that it is probably the single best source of waste that we can remove out of our system going forward. And so I'm supportive of the provincial government having a strategy on that matter. Councillor Forbes, the second time.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of points I forgot to mention. Again, I'm referencing process, not necessarily the resolutions. I think there's very good information in the resolutions. Resolutions can be submitted up to even September to UBCM. So there isn't a timeline where we couldn't still hold, some public information meetings and educate our community before we submit these to UBCM. So I was kind of hoping that that might be something council might consider, that we have a chance to have a public information meeting or two to educate the community. And the other thing, after, just in reference to what Mr. Stewart said, a lot of the information that's contained in these reports come from Climate Caucus that I've mentioned before, including some items have been cut and pasted in tonight, but they haven't been referenced to Climate Caucus. And that's a lobbying, definitely a lobbying group that is registered as a charity charity, but they have funding behind them, and they're definitely a lobby group of elected officials. That's their role. So because it's such a large, that group is a large group from the West Coast to the East Coast, it represents an awful lot of cities and municipalities and regional districts. So that's why I would like to have a staff report that, if they can provide us with their best information for our municipality, and if they can attach any kind of idea of costs along the line of what this may cost us to change to these new systems, that's the kind of information that I'm looking for. Climate Caucus has managed to get 17 resolutions adopted. So I think there's, that they're a strong force. And so it's not necessarily easy or hard, no matter, depending on which way you look at it, to get a resolution put before the government and accepted and passed. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Kern.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that for the LMLGA, the deadline is actually this month, and there's no on the floor resolutions at UBCM this year. But I think it is important. These are actually led by our community. The youth obviously started the single-use plastic reduction, which was part of a circular economy strategy in a sense. And so I think a lot of these initiatives are led by folks in our community. And as Mayor Stewart, as Mr. Stewart pointed out, getting them through UBCM is only one step. But I think it's an important step, and I think we should continue to do it if we're going to address our climate and ecological emergency.
Thank you. I see no further speakers on the matter. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Okay, the motion passes with Councillor Forbes opposed. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 8.7. On this item, we have a speaker on the matter. So, Mr. Teven, welcome. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me as well?
Yes, I can. You have 3 minutes to address council.
Thank you, Your Worship. For the record, Peter Tevan, 1900 Block, Indian River Crescent. Council, I sent all of you a letter a little over a week ago about this subject of forcing existing building owners to retrofit their buildings to reduce or eliminate the use of natural gas, or quite frankly, that would also include coal or oil for that matter, if there's still any of those left. Eliminate it for heating and hot water. In that letter, I explained to you that you will make obsolete pretty much every single purpose-built rental or co-op building that currently uses such energy sources. And I know that there are some. Such a policy would cost mass renovictions and demovictions. And the startling thing is only Councillor Forbes saw fit to reply to or even acknowledge receiving that letter that I sent you. Now you're about to send this issue to UBCM. And I hear you, as you did last time, minimizing the significance by saying that you're just facilitating a conversation or something along those lines. But you know full well under Robert's rules that the mover of a motion must support the motion. So by sending this on, you are effectively making this District of North Vancouver policy. Making policy without staff review and without comprehensive public input. I'm very uncomfortable with making policy without staff overview. And if staff had reviewed this, well, the first thing they probably could have told you is which purpose-built rental buildings would have a target written on their back because of such a policy. When you go to such a building and you tell them they're going to have to spend $5 million plus to retrofit their building, and then they turn around and ask for a demo permit. Staff also could have told you that there's this pesky little section to a certain piece of legislation called the Local Government Act, called the Non-Conforming Use and Other Continuations. It's a series of sections that says basically you haven't got the legal means to do this, to force people to retrofit their buildings. And all of this is a waste of time, unless, of course, you get the provincial government to amend the Local Government Act itself. And that's very dangerous. But here's the problem. At least 4 of you, I know from last time and the previous votes, you've got such ideological blinders on that you don't want to listen to staff, and you certainly don't want to listen to the public. At least 4 of you thinks that the end justifies the means, no matter what the means may be. At least 4 of you, none of you actually having made these changes in your own lives, retrofitting your buildings, you'll ignore what I'm saying here and you will send this along to UBCM. And there it will be met with other members of the Climate Caucus, and maybe it will become law. And as I say to you 4, Councillor Curran, I know you're going to vote for this, Bond, Back, and Hanson, and any others that are going to vote for this. Please stop. Please listen to logic. Please understand what the fallout of such radical moves of forcing people to retrofit buildings, what it will be. And as I said in my letter, you thought one Emery Village was painful for this community? Get ready for 10 of them all at once, because that's what's going to happen. But history says you're not going to listen, and you're going to pass this anyway, and you'll justify it by saying you're enabling a conversation. And it's a conversation that you know will be divisive, harmful, destructive to our community, and expensive. Please protect our citizens, because no one else is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Teven. I will respond to just one aspect of it, and I think some of that was argumentative. I will respond to one aspect, which is just because a matter is moved and sent for a future discussion at UBCM or LMLGA does not make it the policy of the District of North Vancouver. What does make this the policy of the District of North Vancouver is that this council had a vote on this matter and supported the Help Cities Lead project. But it was not because of their advocacy to have the discussion at a broader table for Lower Mainland or province-wide that set this as the policy. It's because of the mandate of the members of council that it is the policy of the District of North Vancouver. Mr. Stewart?
Your Worship, I made this comment before. In the broad scheme of things, given the fact that we have a very older infrastructure in terms of housing, single-family housing, we will not be able to make our carbon targets unless we find a way to encourage single-family residents to upgrade their systems, period. We cannot rely on new construction to do that, given the rate of construction, reconstruction at the single-family homes in North Vancouver.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Councillor Curran, this is your report. Do you have any opening comments on the matter?
Yes, I think it's really important that the issues that Mr. Teven raised, because that's why we need to apply an equity lens to all the policies that we would ever adopt as a municipality. And in Vancouver, for example, where they have a different charter and are able to do things differently, they purposely excluded purpose-built rental buildings from the policy to ensure that there was equity at the forefront of the policy. So I just wanted to state that that's very important. So I think it's important not to conflate those two issues. We as a council have set forward we have a pledge to the community that we are going to achieve our climate pollution reduction targets. And this report clearly shows that in modeling, as Mr. Stewart pointed out, we will not get there without looking at existing buildings. While it's great to see some incentives, and I did want to encourage everyone to check out the Jump on the Heat Pump, the new North Shore. There's a tri-municipal project, and we're really trying to work across the 3 municipalities to do this, recognizing that everyone has different abilities to enter into retrofits. But this will be a great way to reduce or obviously reduce our emissions to achieve the targets that this council has already set. And it will enable us to create great jobs and lower bills and build resiliency for the future. So this is something council already passed, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but I'm just looking forward to it being debated at UBCM. As indicated in the report, 3 of these recommendations are already in the mandate letters from the provincial government to the ministers. And the other 2 are really critical to achieving the targets that we've already set. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Curran. Councillor Bond. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bond, will you be seconding the motion?
I will.
Thank you. Councillor Bond.
Thanks, Mayor Little. I won't repeat much. We did have this discussion when council discussed this movement towards Health Cities Lead at a previous meeting. As said at that time, and as Councillor Curran has reiterated for us, and Mr. Stewart, we will not meet our emissions targets if we do not retrofit existing buildings. That's a simple fact. Most of our emissions come from existing buildings, and therefore they need to be retrofitted. How we do that, and I appreciate the rhetoric and a bit of hyperbole from Mr. Tevan. How we do that is important, and as Councillor Curran mentioned, looking at an equity lens, we could wait a very long time. We do have 25 years, 30 years until we need to reach zero emissions. So maybe the purpose-built rental buildings are the last ones to be retrofitted. So there's lots of opportunities that will not lead to some type of mass eviction of rental homes across the district. I don't agree with Mr. Tevan's analysis on that, and so I will support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship. And I'm also happy to support the motion. And I'd like to make it clear that the motion in itself is not a, quote, radical move. What the motion calls for is for the provincial government to develop a strategy in consultation with local governments to achieve, to implement policy that could achieve our climate change goals. It's calling for enabling legislation for local governments in part. All of this is consistent with our declaration of a climate emergency. And from my point of view, that declaration of a climate emergency was broadly supported by the public. And I don't think we need to waste resources in doing consultations on issues that are as high level as this and that involve statements of values of this type. If it involves a statement of a value such as the maintenance of a healthy planet, then I think we're fully entitled to state those values as members of council, and we have done so repeatedly. So again, I view this as a statement of principle. It's not a comprehensive statement of policy. It doesn't provide detailed analysis of that policy. And as a statement of principle, I'm pleased to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Just my own comments on the matter. I mean, when it came to our council table, I did oppose the matter because largely I felt that a great deal of concern about giving municipalities the power to force retrofits on these. I think that we need a province-wide plan for the matter, and the whole point of Help Cities Lead, I get it, is that they feel that the province and the feds aren't doing enough and trying to use municipalities to get more done. I get that, but I disagree that we should have a totally different GHG scheme in place in Burnaby and a totally different GHG scheme in Richmond. I think that this kind of stuff needs to be led from the provincial level down, and giving municipalities the ability to force retrofits can cause some great disparity in our communities. So I was opposed to the matter when it came to our council. However, I'm absolutely in support of every single member of this council bringing matters forward for discussion to their regional table and to their professional association. And so I will be supporting this motion. Thank you very much. Councillor Hanson, is your hand up for a second time, or is that from last time?
No, pardon me, that was my mistake.
Okay. See no further speakers from council at this time. Call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries with Councillor Forbes opposed. Thank you, Council. Moving on to item 8.8. This is the right to repair legislation. Again, Councillor Curran, this is your report. Any opening comments?
Thank you. Yeah, so this was brought forward for a number of reasons, but in our community, I imagine that other people, as I've talked to, have experienced the same thing, where if a toaster or something breaks, you literally cannot get it repaired. Like, it's hard to find repair shops anymore. It's hard to find businesses. Sometimes if it's an iPhone or something, there's issues with getting replacement parts. But interestingly, this right to repair is actually been largely driven by farmers in rural places, that if they are limited by being able to repair their equipment, they can lose crops, etc. So it's been interesting to see the broad support for it in Canada, especially in rural communities that have farming equipment that they can't repair. There have been attempts to bring this forward at the federal level, and there's been really strong lobbying from corporate interests against it. So this is a challenging issue, but I think ultimately we want to be a community that doesn't send things to waste, and certainly doesn't send our old electronics and things to poor countries in the global south, because that's immoral. And so I think that this is a great way for us to really foster that environment with proper legislation, to have repair cafes in our community. It's something that I'm on the library board, and it's something that I'm trying to advance there, workshops and things like that, to really have the community have the ability to repair products rather than replacing them. And that needs to happen through legislation, although there's some things we can do. So staff, heads up, like we're working on some fun pilot initiatives to do some repair when we're able to meet again in person. So I'm really passionate about this. Our community is passionate about this. The folks that I work with in the climate space certainly want the ability to use less, consume less, and this is one important way to do that. So I look forward to the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Kearns. You're moving your motion. Is there a seconder for Councillor Kearns' motion? Seconded by Councillor Hanson. Any comments, Councillor Hanson?
Just that I thank Councillor Kern for bringing the motion forward, and would just state that as a statement of principle, I do believe this is broadly supported in our community, and I'm happy to support it as a statement of principle. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. For myself, I know that a number of US states have this in place already. Tesla has been one of the ones recently that got a lot of headlines because Tesla was stopping people from repairing their own vehicles, and they would brick your Tesla, where they basically electronically will shut off the Tesla's system in order to stop you from doing a major repair on a Tesla vehicle. And so you'd have to do the repair through Tesla specifically. And so in that case, the expression of the right to repair legislation was basically making it so that someone does not have to go back to the original manufacturer to get the repair services that they want. And I certainly support it for those reasons. For the farmers' question, though, I wonder, a lot of that is leased equipment, and so someone else actually owns the equipment. It's not the farmer typically. If you own the equipment, generally you could repair the equipment. It's when it's under a lease that you can't. And I would have a great deal of concern if I was, say, Finning or Caterpillar or someone who owns some major piece of equipment, all of a sudden the government coming along and saying that the end user has a right to highly alter or change or repair that piece of equipment. So I support right to repair in some expressions, that being allowing yourself to use another certified repair person to be able to do the work. And then I also don't support it in some where it's suggesting that leased equipment might be able to be changed, repaired, affected, even though they don't actually own the equipment. And in that case, I think the owner of the equipment should be able to determine what they want done with it, and that should be outlined in their lease agreement with the end user. So I'm mixed on the usage of right to repair legislation. I think it should exist for certified professionals to be able to do work on equipment, but worried that that's sometimes not how it's actually used in real life. But again, I support Councillor Curran raising this to the regional table for a discussion community to see what other communities would support. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I was just going to make a comment as far as in the real world. A lot of items that are disposable now, you can go out and you can buy $100 fancy toaster, but the labor rates, and by the time they charge you and get the parts, usually the parts are nominal, but you're over the $100 by the time they add in the parts and the labor together. So the whole structure there often doesn't make it feasible to even repair. It ends up being more expensive to repair than it does to just go out and buy a new one. So in the real world, it doesn't always work. That's my only comment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Forbes. Mr. Stewart, did you have a comment? Did I miss you on the rotation?
No, I was going to say, Your Worship, I've done international work in South America, Middle America, Asia, and I can only tell you that there are so many places where we have gone in there and found that there was product that was delivered to the community to improve their quality of life, and they couldn't get the parts to fix it, and therefore the whole exercise was lost. So as a concept, this is really important.
Yeah, I didn't know if I was going to comment on it. You suggested that sending stuff to second and third world developing nations might have a moral overtone on it. Councillor Curran, a friend of mine ran a business where they were shipping tires to South Africa, and the reason why they were doing it is because South Africa sees a lot more value in tires than Canada does. And so they were taking the tires to retread the tires because they have a different safety tolerance, we'll say. They have different priorities. And so South Africa was retreading them and using them, whereas here we were putting them in a big pile at Annacis Island and occasionally having to battle a big tire fire. And so in that case, they were actually, the items were being recycled. There was value added in the process. It was good for the economy in those communities. So, I wouldn't strike it with a moral tone, because I think there's a lot of cases where it's actually been quite effective and supportive of the local community to extract extra value out of something. Councillor Curran, second time.
So exciting when you still have time left after someone says something. So I do, first of all, I just wanted to make the point that I think it's important that we don't speak of other countries in terms of second and third, in terms of hierarchy. But I'm talking about lots of industries that are absolutely extracted from poor countries and then dumped on poor countries. So I agree that there may be instances that aren't, but I think generally our system is extractive and is exploitative, and we need to change it, which is one of the broad goals of why I'm doing this job. So I appreciate that there are exceptions, but I'm kind of challenging that entire system that I think is not benefiting the planet and not benefiting people fairly.
I have to keep up on the jargon, I get it, but I happen to think that calling it second or third world is less offensive than calling it a poor country, as you just did. So it's always a challenge. I think that when you're talking about developing economies, you sort of have to talk about where they're at. And there's
Let's work
lots.
on that. Maybe it's low income. You're probably right, but I think we can find something that's, as long as it's what that economy, what the people who live there want. I think that's the
But
important
no,
point.
you're correct that the UN refers to it as HIPC, heavily indebted poor countries, and so they basically still use the term poor. I just find it to be a label that's got a challenging connotation to it. Members of council, I see no further comments. The item's been moved and seconded, so I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Councillor Forbes opposed. Okay, moving on to item 8.9, UBCM resolution, urban interface areas to address current misuse of toxic rodenticides.
Your
Councillor
Worship, I have a friendly amendment with respect to the rodenticide motion.
Being that okay, I'm going to let Councillor Curran speak, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Hanson. But amending a fellow councillor's report is always tricky, so let's see how we go. Councillor Curran.
Well, I appreciate that Mr. Hanson, Councillor Hanson, Jim said that it was friendly, because it is. We're all trying to do the same thing. So this, if council remembers, that we were the first municipality in Canada actually to ban rodenticides at a municipal level, and I wanted to thank staff in the community for taking action in that. Since that time, we have over a dozen, perhaps more, local municipalities that followed the district's lead and banned rodenticides at a municipal level, which is the only place that we have the authority to do that through current legislation. Since that time, our MLA in North Vancouver is working on a provincial ban, which was what we sought to do. Was we didn't just want to ban it at the municipal level. So I will certainly entertain whatever Councillor Hanson is bringing forward here, if it's more broad than what I had proposed. I did want to say that I'd worked with our district staff on this, who's really put a lot of time and is really leading on this file, and they recognized some of the challenges out there, but I think I'm totally in favor of a more robust policy, if that's perhaps what Mr. Councillor Hanson is proposing.
Mr.
How does that work?
Yeah, well, it may or may not. So I'm gonna say a couple of things here, and I don't know if it'll affect what you're gonna say, Councillor Hanson. So the trick of this one is these are UBCM resolutions. The wording is pretty fixed already because they have been submitted to the UBCM as resolutions. And so any alteration that we have here may affect their viability to be referred to the UBCM as an LMLGA endorsement. We should probably stick to the wording of the original motion so that we don't end up botching its ability to be referred from the LMLGA to UBCM. So I'll just put that out there, and then I'm very curious about, can I put you down as a seconder for the motion anyway, Councillor Hanson?
You can.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Hanson. What's the nature of your
So I propose, and I believe this will be a friendly amendment supported by Councillor Curran, that the resolved portions of the motion change to, therefore be it resolved, the province implement a province-wide ban on rodenticides, and then continuing, and that immediate changes to applicable legislation be made to allow local governments to enact bylaws banning rodenticides on private property in municipalities. So the rest of the motion is the same, but the resolved is different. As Councillor Curran mentioned, this council earned a claim when we were the first council in British Columbia to ban rodenticides within the powers available to us, which is on district lands. I don't need to say too much about rodenticides. It's already been said, but rodenticides are cruel to animals. They're crippling to our environment. They're both inhumane because rats die a painful death, and bad environmental policy because we're killing the exact creatures that keep the rat populations in bay. And there are alternatives. We can do better. There's more humane and environmentally prudent means of controlling rats. So from my point of view, given the leadership that we've shown to date, given the leadership that's been shown by the MLA for North Vancouver Seymour and calling for a province-wide ban on rodenticides, a more fitting motion, one that would better reflect the values of our community and the will of this council, would be the friendly amendment that I put forward, which is a province-wide ban on rodenticides.
Okay, and so if I note the distinction correctly, so under the original ban, it was going to be the original proposal was going to be recommending that a new class of properties, that being the urban interface group, is added to give flexibility to put the rules in place on both the forest urban or forest agricultural and the urban space. And you're saying, why would we make another class? Let's just entirely ban this province-wide. I think I get the material difference between what you're saying, but there is a challenge in that this is already an approved resolution and it may affect its ability to be heard at the LMLGA. Just wondering, Mr. Clerk, can you just comment on the on what happens with these cases when it's actually a resolution to another body?
I think first, Your Worship, we should see if Councillor Curran concurs with the friendly amendment.
Yeah, I would be very happy if we can. I know that Mayor Little, you don't like wordsmithing, but I would be very happy if we could collectively come to a language that council supported. I would be fine with that.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with asking for a province-wide ban. No, what I'm saying is that I don't want to jeopardize it not being heard at the LMLGA floor because it conflicts with the language of the already existing UBCM resolution. Mr. Stewart.
Your Worship, over the years, I've seen many urban motions defeated because of rural and country, I'll call it that.
Urban-rural split, yeah.
Yeah, resistance. And I would just, although I appreciate the principle in the sense that we want to do this completely, I think there will be considerable resistance from the rural area if we move this forward as it's proposed in a modified version. I really think that at the end of the day, our success is going to be getting this motion moved forward, and particularly in an urban area or even a suburban area. But I leave that debate to council, but I just wanted to share my experience with UBCM resolutions. This one, if it included a broad brush, would likely be defeated.
However, it's being referred to the LMLGA, which is not particularly rural, for their endorsement. I'm going to go around the horn just to see, Councillor Bond, do you have any other comments?
I'm just wondering if we can get the clerk to put the amended motion on screen.
Mr. Clerk, are you, we don't have a seconder for an amendment yet, and so we still have the original motion on the floor.
Just get this working. Your Worship, I understand.
Would you like me to read the proposed amendment?
I understand that Councillor Curran agrees with the friendly amendment, so that's the way it stands on the floor. I'll just have to check with staff to see if we have that in writing and can get that shared with everybody else. Councillor Hanson, yes, perhaps you could restate the motion just to make sure we have that correct.
And just before you do, Jim, sorry, Councillor Hanson, Councillor Curran, I want to be clear, well, first of all, there's no such thing as a friendly amendment necessarily in our process. That's just something we add. But I just wanted to double check, Councillor Curran, does this still meet your needs and expectations for LMLGA and UBCM?
So my understanding is that as a council, whatever we endorse now will be what we submit to LMLGA en route to whatever. So we do have the flexibility tonight to wordsmith a bit. But I would say that the two, to Mr. Stewart's point, and I really do appreciate staff's really thoughtful time. The reason that they presented it as it is with the urban interface areas was because of some anticipated pushback. And so I don't want to lose that, but at the same time, I'm fully supportive of a provincial ban. And so maybe we can hear if there's a way that we could say we support a provincial ban, but also we would accept that as an interim measure, because I think that that's more likely to get us closer to our goal faster. So I would like to hear from council, but I think I do share Councillor Hansen's goal of complete ban. But I also want to get there. We've already taken big steps in our municipality. And so I wouldn't want to stop that based on the whole thing being killed. So maybe we can go around and hear what other folks.
Yeah, and so I'm going to come to Councillor Hansen next just to clarify what he's proposing. But I got to tell you, it's starting to sound more and more to me like it's two separate motions. And I get that there's no collision between the two pieces, but I just don't want to end up in a situation where the LMLGA rules against hearing the motion at the floor because it conflicts with or is not exactly the same as the UBCM resolution. We've called it a UBCM resolution, and it is not the UBCM resolution. And so it wouldn't be just a matter of a minor amendment to it. It would be a matter of us submitting a new resolution to the UBCM, which we may do. In fact, I would have no problem with us having two motions. One being that we endorse Councillor Curran's motion as presented. And then in addition, we make our own resolution to the UBCM asking for the total ban. And then you don't put LMLGA executive in a conflict where they say, I'm sorry, this isn't the UBCM wording for it. We're going to go with the UBCM wording. But Councillor Curran, Councillor Hansen, perhaps you could go over the change so we can have the clerks have both versions up on the screen.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. The change would be the therefore be it resolved would read, therefore be it resolved, the province implement a province-wide ban on rodenticides, and then continuing, and that immediate changes to applicable legislation be made to allow local governments to enact bylaws banning rodenticides on private property in the municipalities. And that would substitute for the resolved portions of the existing resolution. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hansen. I got to say, I think it materially changes the motion enough that we should be considering it as a separate motion. Because in one case, the motion is to refer the UBCM resolution to the LMLGA. And in the others, it's to create an entirely new, obviously subject matter similar area, but an entirely new resolution, which I think you'd probably get support for council from council for the separate one. But I think it materially changes enough that I don't know that it's appropriate to be amending it. Mr. Stewart, do you have a comment?
Yeah, no, I would agree with you, Worship. I think it's quite appropriate to have it as a follow-up motion that council can vote on separately.
So in addition to the motion where we're referring the UBCM to the LML, the UBCM verbatim resolution to the LML.
I would suggest that you vote on Councillor Curran's motion and then allow it a follow-up motion, which is extends that to the rest of the province.
Your Worship, are there any issues with respect to timing or, can we just create that motion today? And because I'm happy enough to do that just as a separate motion that then goes before LMLGA.
Okay, so I just want to be clear about that last statement. So there is a timing issue with LMLGA. There is not a timing issue with UBCM. So if we endorse the initial motion, then it would go back to LMLGA to seek its endorsement to go to the UBCM. But if on top of that, we wanted to create an additional resolution that said we're actually asking the provincial government for an entire ban on rodenticides, then we could go directly to the UBCM as a District of North Vancouver resolution for that portion of it. Mr. Stewart, I see you popped up.
Yeah, Your Worship, I just would see dealing with this as Councillor Curran's motion with a notice motion from Councillor Hansen with respect to expanding it. We could deal with that tonight. We don't have to come back again.
Okay, so
thank you.
I just think it materially changes it enough that we should do them as two separate processes. Councillor Bond.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you as well, Mayor Litter, on the process. I think this report has been prepared for council and in kind of the proper format and consideration. So I think we should vote on this as is. I'm wondering if the clerk is up on our UBCM procedure for this year, and in terms of how this motion, should it pass council tonight, will be considered. Is there, if motions that pass council get considered by the LMLGA executive, or it's by LMLGA, and passed at LMLGA, how are they dealt with at UBCM versus how an individual motion from a member municipality or a member jurisdiction would be dealt with at UBCM. I know in the past, motions get grouped into blocks. They get voted on in different ways, and often what happens is if you have a individual motion from a member municipality, ends up at the bottom of the list and never actually gets discussed or voted on at all. So, if the I know it's still a few months away, but if the clerk has is up on the UBCM procedure in the virtual format for this year, how the motions are getting dealt with, appreciate some input.
Mr. Clark.
Yes, Your Worship. Councillor Bond is correct on how he characterized this. It is UBCM's preference that all resolutions go through the regional associations, the LMLGA. That's why these are called UBCM resolutions. They are, in fact, UBCM resolutions being filtered through the local body to be endorsed at that level and presumably move on to debate at UBCM and whether they live or die or not at that level, and they're then passed on to the province. I understand it's UBCM's preference not to accept resolutions directly to the UBCM body that have not gone through a regional association, except unless they're issues that have arisen after the deadline for the regional associations or are of an urgent nature. So an automatic in to UBCM later is for something routine is probably seems to not be on. They need to get through the LMLGA by submitted by the 26th of this month. If that answers the question.
Mr. Stewart.
We're spending a lot of time on something we agree on. So I'm suggesting not that we do a separate UBCM resolution. We merely have a second resolution that goes to the LMGMA that supports the idea of a two-tiered approach. One is urban, and if there's support, one is provincial. So I think we would support Councillor Hansen's motion to the next phase of this without sending it off into somewhere else. So I'll just leave it at that. I think there's a lot of conversation that's happening now that everybody agrees on. Now we're talking about process and procedure, and this is the wrong place to do that. If council wants us to pass Councillor Mira Curran's motion, then we could also pass Council Hansen's resolution that it be more of a province-wide period, and that the next stage of our government can deal with that.
Councillor Bond, back to you.
Yeah, I think I'd prefer just to pass the motion as is at this point in time. Although I also would probably support a provincial ban. I think the likelihood of that getting through to UBCM and finding support at UBCM would be quite low, considering the number of urban municipalities, somewhere in the round of 30 to 40 compared to of the total 190 municipalities that might be at UBCM. So I think in my experience of being at a number of UBCMs, anything that gives an individual municipality the power and authority to make their own decision is usually more supported than something that asks the province to apply the same rule to all municipalities. And so I think even though a provincial ban is in the best interests of the environment and of the creatures in the environment, an incremental approach, at least this year, might make more sense, and it might make more sense for us to come back with another thing at the next UBCM.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. The deadline for LGLMA I was going to mention was the 26th, but the clerk has already mentioned that. And the other thing about resolutions to FCM is I wasn't earlier talking about floor resolutions. They will accept written resolutions after May 26th, but they prefer them to go through LMLGA so that they have a standard type of format that they like to have them in. That's the purpose why they sort of get them cleaned up and organized through LMLGA. But that doesn't mean they won't accept a motion afterwards if it's written in to them. That's all I was going to say.
For the UBC.
Oh, yeah. And one other thing I would like to say, I kind of like your approach too, that if we're going to do this, we break it out, because I can see what Mr. Stewart is saying about pushback from urban areas if we try to do it all in one motion. So I'm comfortable with just passing just this motion as it is. I'm also comfortable with if we break it out into two separate motions.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Back.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not to take too much more time on this issue, to Mr. Stewart's point, I think we all kind of agree generally with where this is going. But I'm of the belief that we should just pass it as is written here. I think we want our best chances of getting LMLGA endorsement and getting this through to UBCM. So at this point, I would support just passing it as is.
Thank you, Councillor Back. Second time, Councillor Curran. Oh, you're muted.
I did it. Oh, I almost made it through a whole day. So I agree with lobbying, but I also just wanted to point out the very exciting news that for the first time we have an MLA that's in the legislature asking for a provincial ban. So it's actually like the motion was to lobby the province, and the province, there is someone actively doing it right now. I've been meeting with her. There's a lot of activists in the community working on it. So not to say we shouldn't do it, but I just feel like that's some exciting action that's already happening. So I'll support the UBCM resolution to ban. I'll also support what I did, because I do think that staff put a lot of thought and care into helping this. And so I want to see what happens, because ultimately we want to get there, but this may be the best path there. So.
Thank you, Councillor Curran. No, I didn't seek a seconder on Councillor Henson's proposed amendment to the original motion. And so at this point, the original motion is still on the floor. And I think I'm hearing everybody around the horn. I think I'm going to test this one by calling the question on it, and then we see where we go from there. Okay, Council, I'm going to call the question on the original motion presented in Councillor Curran's report, which has been moved by Councillor Curran and seconded by Councillor Hanson. Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries unanimously. What I would recommend for Councillor Hanson is that you write a report to Council on banning rodenticide province-wide, or requesting the province ban rodenticide province-wide, and we can have staff comment on the matter before we pursue it. But right now, we at least have the original motion being sent forward to LMLGA for consideration.
Your Worship, Mr. Stewart suggested we could just integrate my motion into a new motion and vote on it. That would be my preference.
Mr. Stewart, do you have any comments? I mean, we can add a motion. I guess sorry, my question is probably for the clerk, but we can add a motion to the agenda right now that effectively calls on the LMLGA to consider a resolution. The only thing I'd worry about is that I don't want to now be competing with the one that we just moved. So all we would be doing is creating a bare bones statement resolution, which happens a lot, by the way. The LMLGA executive, when you look at the policy book, some of them are only 2 lines and some of them are 10 pages. So we would be then creating, submitting a resolution to the LMLGA to ask the provincial government for a total ban on rodenticides. Is that in order to add that right now?
Your Worship, I guess it would be in order in the nature of a follow-up resolution. However, LMLGA has a very specific format and reporting requirements. The resolution has to be formatted precisely according to what they call their gold standard, and the submission needs to be accompanied by a background report. So, characterizing it as the resolution as in the nature of a follow-on resolution means it's leveraged off the same staff report. It would have to be structured akin to the one that was just adopted with the changes Councillor Hanson proposes, is how it would be structured. However, I think we'd probably run into some trouble with LMLGA in that the resolutions appear to contradict each other somewhat, and they would probably send them both back to us saying, which one do you want?
You see, I don't see the direct collision. I think obviously, you know, one is sufficient for the other and one is necessary for the other. But sorry, Mr. Stewart, do you have a comment?
Yeah, Your Worship, I understand the mechanics that the clerk has suggested, but I'm really saying that I think that if we're just doing a follow-up motion saying that we want to apply the same rules provincially, I don't see how that's contradictory, and I don't see how it's going to require another support or another report. I really do think if we want to extend this provincially, and there seems to be provincial support, just a simple resolution, which is to say, as we communicate to the authority, and we thought of this, and we think that has some merit, is sufficient.
Okay. So Councillor Hanson, I've suggested that we depart with the other wording when we do this separate motion, and we just go simply with a resolution that the province ban rodenticides province-wide.
Yes, I'm content with that.
Okay. So will you make that your motion? Okay.
I'll make that my motion.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Curran. Okay. Any other discussion on that motion? And I think the intent would be to use as much material from the existing staff report that is relevant to the new motion, but that the resolution would be endorsed by council as it is, without us specifically having the wording of the background piece. Councillor Curran, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that when this originally came before council, I believe that there was direction from council to ban rodenticides provincially. So that report that I originally submitted would have the information in it. We already have lobbied the province as a council to like that was part of the direction that we gave. So I think that I feel like within our that information exists to do the ban, and I'm happy to help support that with any of the other reports that have already been created. So let's give it a shot.
The old college try. Love it. Okay. All right. Councillor Hanson's motion is now on the floor. Any other comments from council? Okay, I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Councillors Hanson and Curran. Okay, moving on to 8:10. This is the UBCM resolution enabling legislation for green roofs. Councillor Curran, this is your report. Any opening comments?
I'll keep this brief. We brought this forward at a previous UBCM and it was not supported largely for the reason that you mentioned, is that it was unclear that it was at a municipality's discretion. It wasn't a requirement. And so we've reworded it to say that it's enabling legislation. So it's not forcing anything on anyone, but if a municipality, because certain municipalities may not have the resources in terms of the people who actually know how to build green roofs, etc. So that was an experience from the last UBCM. It was very close actually, but at the last minute, someone spoke and said, this is going to be problematic in my municipality. And so we really wanted to make it clear that we're not saying that any municipality has to do this, just that we have the legislation to do it. And then importantly, that we have the legislative ability to regulate once a green roof is put in, to make sure that it stays alive and cared for. There's lots of benefits to green roofs, as I've listed in the report. I went to an entire webinar on green roofs and it was completely blew my mind in terms of the heat island effect, biodiversity, human health and happiness, so many benefits to green roofs. So it's something that I hope that we can look into in our municipality more. This would enable us to have the legislation to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Curran. Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Hanson. Councillor Hanson, any comments?
No, thank you, Your Worship. Just to say, this is enabling legislation that gives, it calls on the provincial government to give local governments more power. And obviously that power will have to be exercised by those local governments in a manner that meets the needs of those communities.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that This one, different from some of the previous ones, is better executed municipality by municipality to some degree. I don't think this has to be province-wide. I think we've got very different geoclimatic zones that will have different approaches to green roofs. We'll also have the issue, I never want this to be an impediment to solar projects. And as we see more technology rolling out around roofing tiles and shingles that can actually act as solar power systems and other alternative energy, and also thermal hot water heating systems and other things that you may place on your roof, I wouldn't want a municipality to say, no, you have to have a green roof. And so just keeping an eye on it. I don't think it changes the motion materially. I just would like to see, I think, as our province grapples with electrification of vehicles and buildings, we are going to need green roofs aren't going to solve the problem. We need energy production and renewables taking place throughout our community as well. And so while I'm supportive of green roofs in some applications, there's going to be times when I much prefer solar power panel projects to take place. And so, but I'm glad you're raising the issue for a broader discussion at the LMLG and UBCM. Councillor Curran, Councillor Forbes, first time.
I'm just wondering, maybe I'm reading this wrong. When I read the therefore be it resolved that we're asking to empower local governments, but when I look at the conclusion of this report, it says to require and enforce. Maybe I'm not reading that right, but it says to require and enforce the related building. Oh, I see. Okay, so the local government act, under this recommendation, the local government would be changed to give the power to the local government, and then they would also get the power to not only require and enforce, but no, I'm confused. That resolved part is enabling us to have it if they change the local government act. And then the conclusion on page 131 specifically says to require and enforce.
Yeah, Your Worship.
Sorry, Councillor, Mr. Stewart.
The legislation as it is right now does not give us a lot of flexibility with respect to what we want to promote or enforce. And I think the motion here is suggesting that we want to encourage this kind of development, and with that have the legislation to both not require it, but to enforce our regulations as to whatever it is that we think it's acceptable in the municipality. I will say I have a green roof on my garage with too many big bloody cedars, but it's a wonderful place, and I do think there's a place for green roofs. And we just have to find the technology, and the technology is really increased in the last number of years. So I think there's an opportunity here, but what's being proposed here is just to ask the local government to give local municipalities, give local municipalities the opportunity to create legislation that fits with their geography. And I think that's really possible in North Vancouver. Let's admit, we are not going to be the mecca of solar power that California is, but there are other opportunities that we have.
Thank you.
We also have broad wildfire DPAs that require non-combustible materials to be included. Councillor Curran.
Thank you. I was just so excited that you brought up solar panels. Now, two of you have brought up solar panels, because there's been some studies recently that have actually shown that green roofs actually are making solar panels more efficient. So it's not an either or. I think that's a really exciting emergent field of study. But just to clarify the point of this, it would allow us to have green roofs if a municipality thought that that was important to achieve other goals, but it would also allow us to enforce the standards of the green roof, so that you can't put up a green roof and walk away and have it not be a functioning green roof. So I think that's the important distinction. But this resolution was already supported unanimously by council last year, so hopefully they'll support it again. I just literally changed it to make it clearer. It didn't change the intent of it, it just changed the language of the title that it's enabling, which it always was. So this is basically the same thing again.
May I just, my second time, just ask you, what do you do in like, we have a wildfire DPA where we, when somebody's house is in the middle of a forest intermix zone, and we require them to use non-combustible materials, could be metal roofs. How do you respond with a green roof in a wildfire corridor?
So that question, I don't know. That's why we would have our wonderful staff be working on how this gets implemented. But I do know that that actually did come up at the webinar that I attended. And there, I believe there were certain types of plants that actually met the standard of not whether it was sedums or something. So it was like the type of plant could actually help with resiliency. But I would want to, obviously that's why we would have to do more research, but I think that that was one takeaway, is that it was kind of like asking those questions that normally get asked and then answer Q&A, and a lot of things that people would initially think, oh, it's going to cost more. And it was like, it showed how it was actually not more over time, etc. So I'm happy to refer the expert in all of North America. He's been working on green roofs since 1996. And is a wealth of knowledge, and that's who led the webinar. So I'm happy to share that information with staff and council.
Yeah, I'd just be curious. I just have lots of questions about it. I mean, I wouldn't, can we use indigenous species? Are the fire resistant ones conducive to, our ecology? Is it different in different areas of the province? But anyway, just lots of questions. It doesn't impede the motion. Mr. Stewart, you had a comment?
Yes, Your Worship. There's no question. There's not been any studies comparing what you would do in a traditional green roof, which has not got a lot of plants on it, but it's relatively flat. But it's certainly better than cedar, and certainly better than a lot of products. So there may be opportunities here. We just have to explore them. As Councillor Curran has suggested, we don't have all the data on this right now. The question is if we want to make a transference, some kind of a change in how we're building roofs. So,
thank you very much. Okay, I see no further speakers on this matter. Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries with Councillor Forbes opposed. Okay, now we have item 8.11 to consider, and I understand that Councillor Forbes intends to recuse herself. Councillor Forbes, you just have to state why. Oh, you're muted. Sorry, Councillor, you're muted. There you go.
No, I wasn't muted, but you didn't. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Oh, I just want to recuse myself because there's ongoing litigation to do with this topic.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So I will leave now.
Thank you. I'm just checking in with the clerk that hopefully met your needs.
Oh, sorry, Your Worship, a little slow on the unmute. Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you. And just confirmation, Councillor Forbes is no longer on my list of speakers. Is that your understanding, Mr. Clark?
Just check one other list. Yes, Your Worship, we're ready to go.
Okay. Okay, Council. So we have the bylaw to regulate the keeping of pigeons now up for discussion, 8.11. Will someone be moving a recommendation? Oh, sorry, I have a presentation from Mr. Milburn. Mr. Milburn, how much time do you need for your presentation?
Thank you, Worship. It's 5 minutes or less. It's just 6 slides.
There is a public speaker as well, Your Worship.
You were correct. I'm going to have Mr. Milburn go first, and then I'll have Dr. Cost come in. Mr. Milburn, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship, members of council. My name is Dan Milburn. I'm the General Manager of Planning, Properties and Permits with the District of North Vancouver. I have a brief 6-slide presentation to provide tonight, and I'll just try sharing my screen. Your Worship, just wanted to confirm that you can see my screen there.
I think he stepped away just for a second. Yes, Dan, we can see it.
Mr. Clerk, excellent. Thank you very much. All right. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. The proposed pigeon regulation bylaw is the subject for conversation tonight. I have both Carol Walker, the Chief Bylaw Officer, and Joshua Cairns, planner, available to answer questions tonight as well after the presentation. In terms of some basic background, in 1971, bylaw 4078 was adopted, which regulated the keeping of pigeons. In 2019, bylaw 4078 was repealed and replaced with bylaw 8402, which prohibited the keeping of pigeons in captivity. In the fall of 2020, council directed staff to prepare a replacement bylaw to again regulate the keeping of pigeons. Staff have prepared a bylaw that is consistent with the intent of bylaw 4078, but with modernized language. As a result, pigeon regulation bylaw 8470 is on tonight's agenda, and it's ready for council's consideration at first reading. In terms of the approach taken by staff, we started by doing an initial jurisdictional scan, looking at other communities and how they regulated the keeping of pigeons, and identified current practices across Canada. Second, we reviewed the original 1971 keeping of pigeons bylaw to identify opportunities for modernization. For example, the current bylaw indicates it shall be enforced through $100 fines or 30 days in jail. This is, of course, clearly not appropriate for modern bylaw standards, and recommended changes were appropriate. Third, we engaged key stakeholders for input to shape the bylaw. In particular, we spoke to various associations of pigeon keepers. We also spoke to known pigeon keepers in the district, and we spoke to the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. In terms of the proposed bylaws, I noted it aligns with the intent of the original keeping of pigeons bylaw from 1971. It updates for modernized language, which includes consistency with other bylaws, clarity and understanding, and alignment with current best practices. So the differences between the 1971 bylaw and the bylaw presented tonight for council's consideration are identified on page 135 of tonight's agenda or page 3 of the report. In particular, I would note that the new language aligns with best municipal practices regarding animal welfare. In terms of next steps, if first reading is given by council tonight, the next steps would involve engagement with the public, which would include an online public input period, and staff are recommending that a public meeting be held. It's tentatively scheduled for April 19th, 2021, and that would be subject to confirmation through public notice. Following that, there would be consideration of second and third reading this spring. So thank you, Your Worship. These are the motions before you for consideration tonight, and staff are available to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Milburn. I'll call on Dr. Cost, signed up to speak on the matter. Dr. Cost, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You are welcome to address council for 3 minutes.
Well, thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Corey Cost, and I reside at 2851 Colwood Drive. My written submission is far too large to read in 3 minutes, so I'll just provide a short summary. Note, my opinions on this matter are my own and not those of any organization I may belong to. I fully support the existing pigeon prohibition bylaw 8402 as it was adopted on November 4th, 2019. I'm opposed to the proposed pigeon regulation bylaw 8470, which would once again allow pigeons in our community. I oppose that bylaw because of the appearance of the abusive process brought about by the majority 4 of council collaborating to repeal the existing bylaw. I suggest that the 4 members of council, a quorum, who drafted the motion in secret did so under a flawed process, an alleged incorrect process. The adoption of the pigeon prohibition bylaw 8402 cannot be corrected by yet another incorrect process. For me, appearances matter. A proper process must not only be done, but it must also appear to have been done. Optics is important. The irony is that the very issue was based on the appearance of a conflict of interest where none can exist when the issue is in common with all district residents. We, the community, were the beneficiaries of the bylaw 8402, the prohibition bylaw. Our health and safety were at risk, and the ban benefited all of us. As submitted, the submitted material attests, so long as pigeons are allowed to fly in residential areas, everyone, and especially our most vulnerable, are at risk. The staff report states that the pigeons are to be, quote, kept within the loft at all times except for limited periods necessary for exercise, training, or competition, when such pigeons must be under the owner's control. That's a hole that a truck can drive through. It's like a dog trying to herd sheep that can fly. Finally, proceeding with this issue in public may well be interpreted as judicial interference with the existing court cases. This matter should be deferred until such court cases are at least settled. In conclusion, sometimes it's the little things that matter the most. Banning pigeons in the district was, in my humble opinion, a good thing. Some have said that such a ban applies to only one case. Even if this were true, which I doubt, the peace of mind that the ban gave all of us was well worth the time of the district council. The existing bylaw is one of the few bylaws that is readily enforceable. The proposed one would not be. It should be noted that every citizen in the district, and this includes members of council, have the right to appeal to our council for relief from a clear nuisance. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Koss. I'll respond to a couple of things and then I'll go to Mr. Stewart. You know, on the eligibility of a report that is undersigned by 4 members of council and whether or not that is a breach of process. So my preference is that there is a clear author of a report. That's generally my preference going forward. However, it doesn't contravene the provincial regulations on the matter, which are very specific that a gathering has to have taken place. And I understand that there's a perception of bias, but you have the 4 authors that have said that they did not gather in the process. They just sought each other's opinion one-on-one. And I encourage members of council to, on their council reports, to talk to other members of council and try to get feedback on their reports so that we have a better quality of report for the community going forward. But I do understand exactly what you're talking about is the appearance of a fait accompli, where because a majority of council has expressed in the written report that they generally support the matter, that it presupposes something that should take place in public, or it denies the public an opportunity to watch the process unfold. And so I'm aware of that perception piece, but on the grounds that a quorum of council did not meet, and therefore it did not contravene the written rule of the provincial requirements. However, I do think it's the best practice going forward to try to have one clear author on a proposal in order to not give the appearance of a fait accompli if a majority of council may support it. As you've seen tonight, lots of the items that come before council have the clear support of a majority of council, and they do find their way through the process without denying the public the ability to review those matters, and yet there seems to be no issue. This is just whether there's a name written on the report or not. And so by their confession that there is no gathering that has taken place, then I don't believe that the report is ineligible for consideration. Mr. Stewart, do you have any comments?
Your Worship, I would agree with your comments. There's nothing in the proposed bylaw or the process that would render it illegal.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, can you just affirm comments about the eligibility of the report? I believe we did discuss the eligibility of the report when this matter first came up to council.
And which report are you referring to, Your Worship? The one authored previously by the 4 councillors?
That's correct.
I can't think of anything more to say. I think you hit the nail on the head with your comments with respect to that report.
So it is an eligible report for consideration by council then in the view of our clerk and in my view. But thank you very much, Dr. Koss, for your concerns. I mean, on the merits of the bylaw, I think that is absolutely fair to express your concerns and opinions on that as well. And I share a lot of your concerns. But at this time, I'm going to go. We've heard from staff. We've heard from members of the public. I'm going to go to is there a mover for the motion?
I'm happy to move the staff recommendation, Your Worship.
Yes, thank you very much. And is there a seconder for that motion? Is there a seconder?
Sorry, Your Worship, I will second it. I just lost my connection there for a second. Okay, let's come back.
We can hear you clearly. You are back. Okay. I've got Councillor Hanson moving, Councillor Back seconding. Is there any further discussion? I see no hands raised at this time. Okay, I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Council. I did promise that this was going to be treated as a regular meeting of Council, which usually means that we have reports at the tail end of the meeting. I know a lot of people want to just get on to spring break and have a couple weeks off. We don't normally have meetings during this time, so counselors who are parents can attend to their kids and also get a bit of a break from a heavy February calendar. This year we had a very heavy February calendar because we were doing a lot of the OCP review matters. And then as soon as we return back from the bit of a break, we're going to be going into the final stages of the budget preparation. And so we have a lot of work. So I hope council enjoys the break. But there is an opportunity for reports. I'm going to go to Mr. Stewart first.
Your Worship, I just want to say I really appreciate council meeting at the beginning of spring break. You know, we had technological problems last week, and I just really very respectful and appreciative of the fact that you taken the time out tonight to reschedule this to deal with all these important issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. And it's good comment. I guess for the people that have joined us, I see we have some attendees as well. I'd love to hear your feedback on this process where we have it integrated entirely into Zoom versus the extra effort we went to use a separate streaming service. What we found last week was that there were communication issues between Zoom and our web streaming service, which is on Vimeo, and they were not able to connect up properly. And so for this meeting, we've done entirely webinar, entirely within the Zoom platform. I like it because you get to see more faces and see people. It's a little more human than just the streaming where it just takes the one singular image, but I would love to hear people's comments on the matter. Councillor Bond.
Thanks, Mayor Little. I'm also having a few technological problems here with my notes, so I'm going to have to improvise my report from memory from the last Metro Vancouver Housing Committee meeting, which was on Wednesday, March 3rd. There was one thing that was quite, two things that were interesting related to our discussion around green initiatives and the environment and emissions. Metro Vancouver has partnered with the province and the Pembina Institute to actually do housing retrofit evaluations. And this kind of speaks to the motions that we discussed for UBCM about mandatory retrofitting of existing buildings. The Metro Vancouver has put forward 3 existing affordable housing complexes that are existing right now, that are not planned for redevelopment, and that are requiring major building envelope renovations and improvements over the next 5 years. And they put forward these 3 projects for this new, it's like an evolution lab that's going to bring together leaders in the retrofit and the energy conservation and industry to look at new ways on how we can make those retrofits so that we can deliver those zero emissions buildings that we're going to need over the next 15 to 30 years. So it's a really interesting kind of innovation project that Metro Vancouver is doing. They're not expecting it to be based on the initial cost estimates and research that they've done to add a significant amount of cost to the retrofits that are required anyways. And so it's a really interesting space that we're going to be watching over the next year or two as these designs come forward for these 3 retrofit projects. One of the more interesting things is that they're really trying through this process in this innovation lab to make it a repeatable process, so that these techniques that are learned through the design and implementation of these projects are going to be repeatable. Because I think that's one thing that we've talked about here at Council, and Councillor Curran has mentioned it. Like, the system needs to change, and so they're doing the research and the implementation to see how the system around retrofits and building construction will change. So I think it's a really interesting project.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Curran.
Thank you. So I just wanted to report back on a few exciting initiatives that are happening in our community. There's a task force called the North Shore Peer Assisted Crisis Team. I met last week, and we're looking at ways to provide alternatives. I shouldn't say we, these other amazing folks in our community are looking at ways to provide alternatives or auxiliary service to police response to calls related to mental health and substance use in our community. So that's going to be something that I'll bring forward more about as we look to getting that. It's a pilot project that's being proposed, North Shore Mental Health. I don't have it in front of me. Can you complete the name of the society? Just some amazing work that's happening there. North Shore Table Matters is an initiative an organization that the district supported years ago, a food strategy for the North Shore, but it's really stalled. And so I'm meeting with the people who are involved in that to try to figure out how we can get the North Shore food strategy. Ultimately, they have a blue sky dream of having a hub on the North Shore that both redistributes food so that no food gets wasted, ties into our circular economy strategy that we talked about, and then also looking at how do we use the food that is wasted to potentially create soil and other things that are happening so that we get to our zero waste goals. The North Shore Immigrant Inclusion Partnership had asked me to come and present on the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. So I went and presented there. And then I also was able to attend another event that they hosted called the Pathways to Participation, and it was women leaders sharing their stories. And that was really great to hear from women in our community about the path that they've found to leadership and supporting other women into leadership positions in our community. And then I know Councillor Bond attended another NISIP event that I was not able to attend, but maybe he can speak to. So that's a bit of some of the meetings. And also just the library board is so awesome. Jordan, you were they're like the most enthusiastic, passionate. Colvier was just nominated assistant chair or vice chair of the school board, and is also, so there's many Colviers. I'm convinced can not be only one of them because everywhere. So bringing a lot of passion to that, and I'm really excited about being on the board there.
Good. Always glad to hear that council's engaged in their committee work. That's great. I have Councillor Bond. The mute hidden by the taskbar. Yeah.
Yep. Councillor Curran did remind me that I did attend the virtual. It was a virtual community forum moving forward to achieve racial equity. As acting mayor, I think you were predisposed that evening last week, Mayor Little, and this forum was a follow-up to a previous forum that happened earlier I think earlier in the spring or perhaps in the fall, introductory forum where a number of members of council attended to discuss the topic of racial equity and oppression for Black and Indigenous people and other people of color on the North Shore. And so it was the kind of the next step into how do municipalities and other organizations and people in leadership positions start to take those steps towards action at relieving and dismantling the oppressive systems that exist in our community. And so I think that webinar has been recorded. So I think it's something that as each of us have the time to do this ongoing work that we're doing on equity and dismantling these systems of oppression, I think it's something that every member of council and members of the community that are needed to do this work should look into.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Pleased to report that on Wednesday, March the 9th, the North Shore Standing Committee on Substance Abuse met for the first time since late 2019. There were two excellent presentations on the opiate crisis and ongoing responses in our community. There were also some statistics provided from Coastal Health, absolutely appalling statistics on the rate of death due to fentanyl overdose in our community. Pleased to report as well that I was at that meeting elected the chair of that body and will serve as chair for the 2021 year. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. It sounds like an interesting body of work. And so at this, Councillor Bond, I think your hand is just still up, okay? And Councillor Hanson. So just one, I think Councillor Kern, you found the name of that association. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. It was the Canadian Mental Health Association, the North and West Vancouver branch. I felt badly that I gapped on the name. So working with Julia there. Thanks.
You bet, no problem. I had a lot of meetings this week, actually, focused on transportation and some of my Metro Vancouver committees. But one thing that is always an entertaining discussion that we have is around the Zero Waste Committee. Every year they do surveys. And what a survey is basically they take waste stream from a variety of locations, and they typically take about 15 yards of waste. So if you can imagine each location, that's probably about 4 of those large yard commercial bins, and then they dump it all out onto the concrete floor at one of our facilities, and then they over a period of several days they pick through every single thing, and they categorize everything they find in there down to about 72 different categories, and then they in the end you get left with some fines, unidentifiable things, but largely it all gets categorized in some way as they go through the review. And what they found fascinating, so the review was done back in September and October. So it was during COVID, but at a time when our numbers had dipped a little bit at the tail end of the summer and leading into the fall, but they were on the rise again. And but it was still fascinating what they found in it. You sort of would have thought that takeout containers and single-use cups and stuff would have been way up because you know, if you look at a local A&W or a local, I shouldn't say a specific restaurant, it's happening at all restaurants. There's a lot more takeout material being used, and you would assume that it would mean that there would be an increase. But there was such a decrease in downtown Vancouver because people were not going into work, and people at home were quite often using their own home, you know, brewing coffee and such into their own mugs and their own reusable containers, that we actually saw a significant reduction in single-use products. So the perception was that everybody was going to take out, and all of a sudden the takeout containers were going to dominate the waste stream. But it appears that in the end, people are better stewards of their waste when they're at home than they are when they're downtown. And so we actually have reductions in some of those areas. So, but it was fascinating. It's a fascinating report they do every year at the Metro Table. It is a public report, and you can watch the video and presentation on it at the Metro Vancouver website. I would highly encourage you to. It's 15 minutes well spent following the breakdown of all of the locations. They actually found that medical masks and gloves was actually not a significant portion of the waste. Still, our biggest problems are still coffee cups and other things like that, but it was less of an issue because downtown was nowhere near as many people at their workspaces. Yes, I see no further speakers, no further reports at this time. Pressing too many buttons all at once here. There we go. Council, I see no further reports. So I'm going to thank everybody for their participation tonight, and extra special thanks on an unexpected evening that we had to respond to the technology, and I'm glad that we were able to make it happen. Big part because Councillor Curran had a lot of presentations that we wanted to make in time for the LMLGA cutoff, and also some of the grants that were proposed earlier tonight that were supported by council also had cutoffs. And so I'm glad we were able to. It meant that staff could continue on with their project. At this time, I will accept adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Back. Accepted. Everyone have a fantastic week, and we'll all get together again soon.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.